happen on the committee
Yeah.
before
What
the
you're
ask
asking is
gets
not an
made.
authority question, it's a committee to recommend to the authority the range and who and what, sir.
Okay.
If I may, if that's okay with you, sir.
No, that's fine. I just know that some of the schools who can make a contribution don't have pockets as deep as REAP. On the other hand, I wouldn't expect REAP to put it at 50,000. So if the school can participate for $5 because if you don't pay for it, you're not going to tell you what to contribute. But
Totally agree, sir. In which case, you consider yourself part of the recruitment committee. Be careful what you say, sir.
One point of clarification. As I understand the way this is structured, sound like it not serve as a non-profit consortium, but somebody else runs it.
That's correct. Sort of a conflict of interest issue to ensure that the authority and the consortium are indeed separated. Even though they may have members from each of the institutions and organizations serving on both of the institutions at the same time, the reality is that there has to be a different individual who serves in each capacity.
Yeah, my view is we need to have some built-in flexibility. Is the key for me is getting this thing started and organized and so forth. And there will be variances and disparities. Mike and Dave and I well belong to an organization with very different, probably amounts of dues that were based on size of the company, revenues and things like that. I mean, that's, I'm sitting there worried about it. It's way too complicated for us right now. Maybe eventually this thing really takes off and we can get into structure. But at the moment, that's where we are. It's sort of stateless. No appropriation. We have to figure out a way to get it started, make sure everybody has the ability to have a role as best possible, respect the fact that we're all willing to say, yeah, I'm not expecting you to have some equal measure that I have so that we're all getting exactly the same dollar putting in right now. Let's get it started.
There was one thought we had in our discussion at the special committee meeting, and I'm not sure if it made it into the minutes, is that you could do, reflecting exactly that idea, is that you could ask for limited term commitments, sort of preliminary commitments of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, so that folks are not locking in for the long term, but agreeing to commit to help things get up and running and create the value
And
proposition.
if we begin to demonstrate value, it won't be a problem.
Right.
You could say some of it is
And the specifics were something we did not have the time to get to at our March 17th meeting, Mr. Chairman, but we believe that if we had the right recruitment committee made up of the right entities and organizations, that we would be able to bring the actual range of variability so that when we established a process, that process would acknowledge and recognize that variability in who could and could not, and what we could do, including the in-kind, including, as Maureen said, the initial step up and that it could be over certain periods of time. And these were the specifics that we really felt needed to be made with those organizations, which would be the greatest likelihood of being the consortium board members.
Okay.
As a practical matter, you set out the goals in terms of the outcomes. If you don't achieve those goals and outcomes, it should be coming beyond something. 2 years. Being stars,
It was my intent to ensure, as a part of the recruitment committee activities that we conducted, that we would not only do this in an instance of what we were doing in the short term, but what did that mean in the long term? What could we and should we expect to ensure that there was a recognition that we did not get ourselves into a financial position that was untenable because we could no longer get the dues or the fees that were necessary to conduct the business of the authority. So yes, sir, we are very well aware of the potential limitations that may be in some period of time. So the again, we're doing all the business of the recruitment committee now, but nonetheless, when we get to that, I will want as much input as I can from those of you to make sure that we have addressed all the specifics to bring back to the authority a plan which considers everything that you brought up at the table today.
Okay. Any further discussion on the planning board member recruitment proposal? If not, all in favor, please signify. Aye. Any opposed? It's adopted.
And the last part of that, ladies and gentlemen, is our proposed timeline consortium establishment. which is recognizes today's meeting with full authority board meeting approving the articles of incorporation, the founding board and member proposal, the division of responsibility and timeline, and the letter from the authority consortium. Then in May, follow the approved articles of incorporation based on putting in the names and everything as you stated, Maureen. And then April to June, consortium board member recruitment. With the established recruitment committee recognition that we would begin speaking to those consortium boards and members to get a sense of telling them, one, what the budget is, two, what the return on investment is, three, the value proposition for short-term and for long-term to move forward so that we can hold the initial consortium board meeting in the June or July timeframe of 2014. And to recognize as we move forward, so we would, like you, Mr. Chairman, we are committed to getting this up and running to ensure that by the middle of this year, we have not only the authority fully engaged, but also the consortium engaged, consortium board, so we can move forward with conducting the activities that we were tasked to do. And then July and August, recruit, interview, and executive director, if so approved, and then September, hire as executive director. Now, what this does not show, and probably should have, is the fact that out of this meeting, we need to establish the recruitment committee that the chairman has asked me to chair, which I'm glad to do, and then getting you to agree and for us to move forward with a plan and where we can conduct business, where we may have to come here again in the next 3 or 4 weeks to meet with the public engaged, where it's another special meeting where we're meeting as the recruitment committee to move forward on the documents that we would then get the approval of the full authority so we can move forward in June and July.
Everybody get that? This is a quick timetable. This proposes having an executive director on board in 4 months.
There's some people around this table, if I ask for an appointment, to talk about this, I might be lucky to get the last week of June, just based on the calendar. Including social. It's fine to have it as aspirational, but I don't think we can understand.
Well, you don't get what you don't ask for. Sorry.
But
Well, in recognizing that some of them, but no reason not to. I have one technical comment, and that is that the articles of incorporation, one of those 2 documents, we really need board members before we can file. So we have to do the recruiting first and then do the filing. So the May 2014 filing needs to get bumped down to after.
I'll put it behind June and July. I was thinking you could file general ones and not have the name, but I guess that's not possible. Okay, very well, so be it. I will move it accordingly, Mr. Chairman.
Question for the special committee, in the discussion of the hiring, was there any discussion of perhaps contracting for some planning services initially to lay a firm foundation for a long-term life? I'm just thinking it might be difficult to hire a quality person with a lot of unknown, where you could contract for planning services and set that up. I don't know if you can speak to that.
We had considered a number of different actions, and none of which we had settled on simply because there's a number of unknowns. And because of the lack of knowing that, we felt the sooner that we established a schedule, albeit somewhat aggressive, and got engaged, we would adjust accordingly. It may very well be that because of the time frame which the consortium board comes on board and the activities necessary to ensure we hire an appropriate and competent, qualified executive director, that he or she is pushed back to October or November. But we did feel we needed to set a goal to get started to ensure we were beginning to make progress in this calendar year, because as you all know, we're responsible for telling the Assembly in November of this year what we have conducted in 2014. And in order to do that, we felt that the more we could get done and get business started, the better off we would be in making sure it was a positive report to the Assembly in November. Our fear was that if we didn't make enough progress, that the Assembly may not see the value in it that maybe the previous administration did, and we needed to ensure that we maintained enough progress and enough success that indeed they could see that we were serious about the business of this and how it really benefited the Commonwealth.
But before you do that, I'm just sitting here looking at this, wondering why we should have to timeline, which has a lot of uncertainty to it. And I would rather just get a consensus that we recommend the proposed timeline as best possible. I'd rather, and then but not on the record for adopting something without it installed, so we might not do it. So, amend away.
No need to amend if we're not going to adopt.
File your amendment with the
I
chair of the
was
special
only going to
committee.
suggest that we replace the recruitment interview of executive director with something a little more oblique, like provide for consortium staff to allow for different possibilities according to Bob's suggestion. That, you know, whether it's contract staff or someone part-time or something other than perhaps the, you know, full-time, brilliant, permanent executive director that we have in our future.
As the proposer of this, I accept your amendment to say provide for the corporation consortium established staff to provide an individual who could serve as an executive director in the interim or some kind of activity, if you're okay with that.
So if you're comfortable, just have the minutes reflect the discussion of the recommended timeline. All right, any other new business under the special committee?
Let me offer this.
Yep.
And it ties back to several